And we're live. Welcome back to another episode of Soulful Sips. I'm Alyssa.
I'm Julie.
And we're joined by two very special guests today, our siblings.
Yay! Welcome, James, and welcome, Sophia.
Thank you.
Big round of applause.
Do we want to start with just really brief introductions for the both of you? Just who you are, which counterpart of Soulful Sips are you related to, and a fun fact. No, I'm just kidding. Not a fun fact. That's the worst thing that you could do to someone. But yeah, who you are, who you're related to, and then what are you sipping on today?
So we'll start with James.
Okay, hey guys. I am James. I am Alyssa's older brother, sometimes mistaken as her younger brother, because we're relatively the same height, and she acts more mature than I do, oftentimes. I am drinking Kanaikao, the Japanese whiskey.
You fancy, bro.
Oh, you brought out the good stuff.
I did. I bought this when I moved into this house from California to Minnesota, and I only break it out during special occasions.
Well, we're honored.
So honored.
Thank you for coming onto the podcast with such a special drink.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Nice to meet you, James. And over to Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm Julie's younger sister. And today I have water with me.
Hydrate or dihydrate. Love it. For staying healthy.
So I was laughing when James said that you are sometimes mistaken for the younger sibling, because I'm sure Sophia said it all in her head, but just chose not to say it IRL. But yeah, she's typically the older, mature sibling when the two of us are present in the room. So we've got lots to unpack here.
Yeah. You don't know whether to be heartbroken or flattered.
Sure, it changes depending on the environment.
I have my own perceptions of reality that I choose to go forward with.
That's such a polished and diplomatic way of saying how you really
It's
feel.
rehearsed, I promise.
Yeah.
It's taken some time.
When you read between the lines, we know what you really
Yeah.
This is the pain face. I know people can't see us, but I have a pained expression on.
Awesome. I'm already so excited to have both of you on the podcast. This actually came about a couple of episodes ago when we were shooting a pilot, and we kind of naturally went into growing up in this very kind of traditional value system and how we differed, and the comparison with our siblings kind of came up naturally. So we were like, can we please do a sibling special and get their perspective? So yeah, thank you guys for coordinating your times. I know it wasn't easy, but we're super excited to have you.
Yay! And Alyssa, in my non-smooth way of asking, what are you drinking?
Oh, okay. So my drink is actually kind of inspired by a drink that you made me at your place not too long ago, the strawberry milk. And James, hopefully you'll pick up on this. This is kind of an ode to the strawberry milk that grandma used to make us when we were younger, when she would literally just like chop up strawberries and put sugar and milk in, but like it's not blended. You just stir it together. So you get like the little berry bits. But yeah, that's what I have. And then I
It
have,
was pulp and it was amazing.
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. My grandma and dad made us something very similar, but without the milk. It was just strawberry, like juiced up.
Oh, yeah!
You still get like chunks, and you put sugar in it, and it was just like a.
I thought that was only with orange, like the chur.
No, it was also strawberry too.
Oh, shit. Okay, cool. But yeah, I've had that drink at Alyssa's place, and damn, it's good. It's really, I had 2 cups.
Yeah. I don't know, because she was too polite, and I like look over and she's like digging for like the last like, remnants of strawberry, and I was like, I can make you another.
That was after my second cup. She's like, you sure? I'm like, I'm good.
But yeah, that's my fun drink, and then I have coffee for energy and water for hydration.
Wow, you've got the spectrum there. I think I just got the one most unhealthy one out of the 3, and that's just coffee. That's what I need as a productivity booster for my day.
No, that's
I
understandable.
like it. What time is it over there?
10:25 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got so many time zones here for anyone's listening and understanding that our energies might be all kind of different across the 4 of us.
Yes. So like Julie and I, it's like breakfast time for us, and James and Sophia. It's like dinner time for you guys.
You have your day juice, your morning juice, and I have my night juice.
Exactly. All right, so why don't we then get into some of like just really dive into our topic of the day, because there's so many things that I've been curious about. We've kind of assumed some similarities between Alyssa and I across our siblings with each other, to the point where we almost fear that our siblings would be best friends with the other friend. So we'll see how we come out through this. I mean, the alliance we've already made between me and James, and then between Alyssa and Sophia, it's been pretty strong. So I wonder if we'll just start defending each other, but it'll be all good.
Hey, que sera, sera.
Yeah, the older sibling versus younger sibling came out pretty naturally, I feel like.
Yeah. Alyssa, I can't do as great of a job as introducing the prompt as you will. Do you want to take it away?
Sure. So let's just start off with, so obviously all of us here are children of immigrants, so we share all of that in common. And growing up in a Western culture with very traditional kind of East Asian values obviously proves as its challenges. That's not something that's unbeknownst to the outside world. But would love to hear, James and Sophia, what were your first core memories where you felt that difference in culture dynamic?
James, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, I can go first. Shoot. I mean, as a kid, there was a lot of times where I struggled to balance Vietnamese culture and American culture. There were a lot of aspects of American culture that my family didn't truly understand, and that at times led me to feel separated from my peers. So when you ask, you know, what was the earliest memory of me feeling different than my peers, I kind of always felt that way. As a child of two immigrants, there was often times where I would truly, kind of question my identity, because I go to school and I'm American. I come home, I walk through that door, all of a sudden I'm Vietnamese again. You're not allowed to speak English in the home, and you would get scolded if you do. So the moment you walk through that door, your identity changes. And then the moment you walk out that door in the morning to go to school again, your identity changes. So it's a very atypical experience for a kid. I mean, as far as relative to me and my peers, there were times where, now looking back, I would think, wow, that's so inappropriate. But at the time, I would laugh it off, right? Kids would, pull their eyes back and say, "Oh, do you see everything in widescreen? Ching chong wing wang," and they would make these extremely racist jokes. But being a people pleaser and also just trying to fit in and reconciling those two identities, of course, I just laughed it off.
Yeah, I think as kids, it's so easy to overlook a lot of those microaggressions and just not even realize that they are microaggressions. Sometimes they aren't even micro, right? They're just straight in your face. But for a little bit of context, so James and I were born and raised in Minnesota in the United States, and it's a Midwestern state and pretty predominantly a white population, especially in the suburbs. So oftentimes we were kind of the only kids that were from dual cultures. So that, I think, impacted a lot of our experiences as well. But James, thank you for sharing. That's actually interesting for me to even hear as your sister that you felt like that from the very beginning. Sophia, Julie, do you guys have anything to share from your experiences growing up in Canada and if it differed at all?
I guess for me, I never really had kind of as aggressive, like in my face like that. I think for me, where I just kind of felt the cultural differences, where I think this is like pretty popular, which is food. Like my lunches would kind of be different, or my dumplings would smell funny, and I would be like embarrassed about that, and I would ask my parents to make me pasta instead, which they did. But looking back, obviously, I don't like. I wish I just enjoyed my dumplings. So I think there was food. I think as a kid, though, whenever I did see points of, I guess, racism, it reminds me of another scenario where I was in school in elementary school, and my other Asian friend, she had noodles for lunch. And then another classmate had, pointed that out, and she's like, "Oh, what's that Karen's eating? Like, those look like worms." And I defended her. I was like, "These are noodles. Like, there's nothing wrong with her food." And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I basically was like, "There's nothing wrong with her food. It's her food." And I remember that distinctly because that other classmate that made fun of the noodles ended up crying because of me, because I defended because I defended the noodles. And then that
Swift
was like a
justice.
whole thing, but everything resolved itself. But I just remember that. So I guess I was never, thinking back on that, I was never one to just sit back and let those scenarios play out, even when I was younger. But like the little things, like, I don't know if it's little, but the things like a food, or I think there was this. Oh, interestingly, I don't even know if I told you this, Julie. Last name. Our last name is O, which is OH, and it's very short. And I don't know when, but when I was really little, like probably like grade 1 or 2, I just had this thought where I'm like, I wish my last name was longer. Why can't it at least be like 3 or 4 letters long? Why does everyone else have like Smith, or like longer last names? Why is mine just so embarrassingly short? And I like, to those listening, I have air quotes for embarrassingly. Obviously, for now, like, I enjoy it. I'm like, oh, that's it. When I spell out my last name to people, and it's fun. It's a fun, like, last name to have. But back then, I do remember having a distinct thought about, like, why isn't my last name longer? I wish it was longer.
And I wonder, and is it okay if we dialogue?
100%.
Please.
I wonder if this is something that the average second generation and above Asian American goes through, because I remember a time where there was a point in time where I was so self-conscious about my identity as an Asian kid, and so I actually went to my mom and I said, "Mom, sometimes I wish I was white." And I like distinctly remember the look on her face, and like her face dropped and she paused for a second, and then I'm trying not to get emotional talking about it, but she said, she was like, "Gong," which is like an affectionate way of saying like son, or my child. She said, "Gong, you shouldn't say that. You should be proud of who we are." And then from that moment forward, I was established, firm belief that I should be proud of who I am, and there is no reason to be ashamed, and there is no reason to strive so hard to fit in with people.
Alyssa, your face, you looked very surprised. Is this your first time hearing this?
Yeah. I mean, I think there was obviously a difference in dynamic when we grew up, and we talked about this a little bit. I feel like growing up, you being sandwiched in between me and our oldest brother, who were very like kind of cookie cutter kids and very much followed those values. I feel like it was a little bit more difficult for you. And and now I'm trying to think back, like it could relate back to just how empathetic you were and just how much you take in the outside world and wanting to make sure that you could feel like you had a sense of belonging everywhere that you were. But I didn't know that it affected you to the extent that you were like, I just want so badly to be white or whatever. I didn't know that. That's very surprising for me. How old were you at that point? Do you remember?
That was when I was 8 years old, so maybe like what, third grade
Yeah.
in the U.S. Yeah.
Oh man, that's so young to think about that and have that affect you and be a point of conversation with parents. And can't imagine how your mom must have felt in that situation, trying to help you feel confident about who you are. And what I'm also picking up on is, you know, all across the four of us, all of our experiences are quite different.
Yeah.
Not only our environment, but even as people ourselves. I would actually relate quite well to James in being the people pleaser and wanting to fit in and kind of not really regarding my own values or identity as much as being a more molded part of society versus like Sophia, you were ready to defend and just go up for bat and even made the girl cry. And like you were really strong in who you were and not ashamed of it, right? And I'm sure you're not always, you were asking for the pasta as well. And I do remember our parents delivering on that pasta and burgers every single day. But that also goes to show how even if there's an Asian North American experience, it means differently to everybody based off of how we're wired. Although I do think there are some really great commonalities for us to discuss as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there are some definitely fundamental commonalities of the first gen Asian North American experience. But yes, the lens in which you perceive it in and how you navigate it, I feel like has been so nuanced based on everyone that I've talked to so far.
So in that sense, I would love to kind of do a round table as well. Maybe we'll go from Sophia to James this time. How was it? What was your identity within the family dynamic as it relates to your approach and mindset to life and your values system? I would just love to paint a picture for the rest of us on the call and also to listeners on what your approach tends to be and how you may perceive yourself to be either similar or different from your parents and siblings.
I think for me as a person, a lot of my values, which I think you and Alyssa have talked about in prior podcasts, is that I'm very family oriented. So I kind of think Julie and I have had many, many fights and discussions about this. And I think we're at a great point now where, I respect the fact that she has different values than me. But for me, mine is very family focused. I am someone who will spend a lot of time and energy trying to make sure my family is well cared for. And, I also try to think long term, like what kind of relationship I would want to have with my parents, any regrets that I might have. I want to make sure I don't have any regrets when the time comes. And I think a lot of my current motivation is still family. Like the only reason I want to strive to have a good career, to make good money, is so that I can, let them retire at peace and, just support them throughout the whole time. Like I really couldn't care less about having a luxurious life myself. I hardly spend money on myself. And I think this is something that both my sister and like my parents even like really push me to do. They're like, Sophia, spend some money on yourself. It's okay to do that. But for me, it's hard to like justify that. I will bus for 2 hours instead of taking a 20-minute Uber ride because I'd rather, to me that trade-off is worth it. I would rather spend a few bucks on a bus ride than, $40 on an Uber. And to me, it's just like, oh, why not just, it's only like an hour or two of my time. And I think those all just add up, and I find it hard to spend money on myself. But I'm doing better these days. I think I went a long-winded way of saying I value family first, and even my current motivations are very family-driven. Which can be suffocating to them, but it's hard to stop.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing I don't think it was long-winded because you did share what the value was and a few examples because I know for me, as somebody that's not geared that way, it does help to understand in relation, like you'll take the bus ride. For me, I'm just like, F the bus ride. I'm taking Uber. I care about my time. I'm precious. Like, and also just recently to see you, quote unquote, like painfully spend money on yourself get a decent place to yourself as well, that was a huge milestone, right? And so being able to see you grow through balancing what you know logically is also important in addition to what you already have as your fundamental value for family is great to see as a sibling. So with that, Alyssa, you
Yeah, can I before you go, James, I will just say like I relate to you so freaking hard, Sophia, and like I feel like you basically just described like my core.
Oh,
Because like I grew up very similar, and even like as young as I can remember, I just remember when we were talking about like what do you want to be when you grow up. My thought was not like what my dream profession was. My thought was I just want to be successful enough where I can take care of my parents. Like that was the end goal, and that was I think why I struggled so much as I was heading into college and trying to figure out my career trajectory because I was an ambitious kid, but not ambitious in the fact that I knew exactly what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be. I knew who I wanted to take care of and who I wanted to live for, basically. And I kind of went through the same thing, especially in these past years as I was kind of the closest kid to my parents, as my brothers were both kind of pursuing their own things in different states. And I remember even having this conversation with James, like when I made the decision to move to Korea, just being like, it just felt so like everything against my core to do something solely for myself. Like I felt really selfish doing it. I really struggled with the decision because for the first time, like I had to make a decision that wasn't directly benefiting my parents and I couldn't be around them and I just had to do this for myself and that was a really difficult decision for me. So Sophia, I'm just so you know you're not alone.
yeah, no, I'm proud of you for doing that, and I know exactly how hard that must have been for you. So kudos.
Yeah.
love it. We're making
Wow.
alliances already.
Well, and for me, it was I I didn't do well in school. I was not an achiever. I was in the clouds. My head was always in the clouds. I liked to have fun. I liked to feel good, but all the while still recognizing family values and recognizing that family comes first. Um, but for me, the way I see it, you grow up as an Asian American, and like I said before, you have these two bubbles, and you come home and your identity is one thing, and you leave the house and your identity is another, and so you have to mature differently than other kids, and so then for me, since my head tended to be in the clouds, I would run through those motions at home, but then when I would leave the home, I would say, you know what, I have a lot in me that I want to expand. I want to also take care of my family by soaking in anything and everything I can learn from the world. It was to the point where I had to kind of detach myself from family for a little bit so that I could find a way to return and take care of my family.
So James, was it always clear to you that family was first, or did it take some, living life, figuring things out to land there?
Yeah, it at my core, absolutely. At a very young age, Sophia and Julie, you might be able to relate, but at a very young age, my siblings and I were very, very aware of the fact that my parents had sacrificed so much so that I could be here, so that I could have the opportunity to say, Mom, I wish I was white. So they had sacrificed so much for me just so that I could be at that point. And so at a very young age, we realized that. We recognized these sacrifices, and we had always I kind of struggled a little bit because I felt like I was a little bit of a dark horse in the family. Obviously, like I said, at the core, that is what I hold true always. But then my methods were different. My methods were, okay, I'm going to explore. I'm going to, like I said, soak in anything and everything that I can. I'm going to try new things. I'm going to just, be a vagabond for a while and try to find my identity and take care of myself and kind of enter a period of growth for myself so that I can eventually come home and better take care of my family.
Let me see if I can like summarize that really quick. So I feel like, James, with you, although you were very aware of the core value system that was instilled within our family, I feel like that sense of responsibility and burden and pressure weighed a lot heavier on you than it did for me growing up. So that so your viewpoint was, I'm going to independently figure myself out first. Like, I need to know myself before I can take care of my family. Whereas I was very much like, I will always live through the lens of acting for my family before I figure out who I am, because who I am is engraved in my family. So I think that's where we differed. Not that you didn't have a sense of core family values, but you approached it in the opposite way that I approached it.
Right. Like, and that's definitely spot on because growing up, and like you said, I was sandwiched in between you and our older brother. Both of you were so academically gifted. So why was I the one to the family? Why was I the one that wasn't gifted? Why was I the one who was aimless and wandering? And so I kind of took that and ran with it. And you and our older brother TJ, I felt like your paths had always been clear. You know, your grades were amazing. Your dedication, your devotion was unparalleled. And for me, I said, I can't do that. I don't know if I want to. As a result, that leaves me kind of with kind of a more open oyster, I guess. I wasn't locked into anything. I was free to be myself finally, and to find a way to find my niche to better myself.
Julie, how do you react to that kind of also being more on that side of the spectrum where your value system really stemmed from, listen, I need to take care of myself. I need to know my own boundaries, my own values, my own worth before I consider and take care of others. Like, how do you react to that?
I'm curious how I'm going to respond too, because my immediate reaction is Sophia's going to do a much better job at describing me than I will describe myself. But let me give it a shot. I would say when I was hearing James, and thank you for sharing, uh, where it was really at your core with family being first, and you kind of confirmed through your life experiences in your own way that that is the case. I would say it is different from me. I I believe that family is very important, but the way that I see it is the like selfishly enough, I am always still first. Whether I get enough sleep, whether I am, living my best life, my values and experiencing the world, all of that, that's very much, if I were to pick one thing, it's quite easy for me to say, yeah, that's who I am. And so growing up in the Asian culture and with a sibling whose value is quite aligned with family first, it was hard for me to feel like I'm a decent enough person. Not to be super horrible on myself, but I did feel like I was doing something wrong. And I still do. I still feel quite guilty that I'm not able to just say to you guys here today that, yeah, like I really care about my family and my family's, I would do absolutely anything and I live for them. Unfortunately, that would just be me being dishonest to myself. And I haven't been able to pinpoint why that's the case. But when I think about my priorities and how perhaps it was the Western society has taught me to take care of yourself, the more individualistic mindset, it's just ingrained in me that that's the way of life that has felt most natural to me. Sophia, how would you react to this?
No, so when James was talking about how family, he knew at his core that family was first, I was actually very curious to hear Julie's reaction because I did feel like that was different. What I guess in the beginning of the call, I kind of assumed James and Julie would be on similar wavelengths on that, but it actually sounded like um, might be a little bit different. I think I don't have much of a reaction to that because this is all things that I've learned over the past, several years, and I've come to accept it. I don't think it's an easy change by any means, and I don't think she needs to change. She just has her separate values, and a cute example I will give because Julie mentioned sleep. A very very cute example, nothing severe at all, but an example would be New Year's Eve. My family, we always like stayed up to 12, at least my dad and I, because my mom would, like, her job like might cause her to stay at work until 12, but we always made it a routine, a tradition, to kind of bring in the new year together. But Julie, she has to sleep, and she will not wake up when we try to wake her up a few minutes before. And so some years we had quietly in her sleeping room, we'd be like, "Happy New Year, Julie,"
And I remember them.
just to try to celebrate it with her. At a certain point, we started giving up, and we would just, head down to the living room again if she didn't wake up. But it was just her prioritizing her sleep, prioritizing herself. Now that it never registered to me that it was like, her prioritizing herself. But now that I think about it, it's probably just like a cute example of that versus me. Even though I'm like super sleepy, I would want to stay up to ring in the new year with my family. Exactly. Exactly.
You fought to stay up for
Oh man.
for that countdown.
Yeah. That was like every year, every birthday, every whatever celebration it is, that might sacrifice my routine and just like I'm out. Count me out. Enjoy. That's good. How did the dynamics between you, the both of you, Alyssa and James, pan out, and what have the discussions been as you guys have developed the, adult sibling relationship and your differences?
Yeah, I mean, we fought like cats and dogs when we were younger. Like, I think we kind of mutually, hate is a strong word. We mutually heavily disliked each other as kids. But I think at the end of the day, it's like he's my older brother. So if there were things that happened, like I always knew that he was going to have my back. And um, what James mentioned earlier, which I think is interesting about myself and our oldest brother, both being on academic tracks and both being very both having our paths very clear for us, I think is interesting because I never felt that way, although I was very academically inclined. But our whole family sentiment was always that James is actually the most inherently intelligent of all of us siblings. And because TJ and I are not, we just had to naturally work harder at school. But yeah, academics does not reflect intelligence. And, we've always kind of said that James was the smartest one, which is, I think, why he rejected so much of the school system, because it was not in any way serving you and the things that you wanted to learn about. So yeah, but as we grew up and as we kind of went our separate ways for college and lived apart, I think we definitely got a lot closer, and we're kind of able to come back and bond on certain things that we had both gone through. But growing up was just different. Like, again, James, like, I know you knew in our core values, like, that family had to come first, but I think what you said earlier, it took you a while of self-discovery to come back to that and process all of it. Because at the moment, like when we were in those moments, there were a lot of times where I felt like you were kind of just like detached from the family a little bit. And I could never understand you having such a large social circle and you having these friends and putting so much value in these friendships, where I was always just kind of like at home and I would kind of drop everything to make sure that I was with family. And if you had plans, like you stuck to your plans and you put those priorities first. And that wasn't something that I understood growing up. And now that obviously we're older, I understand it more. But yeah, I think there was just a lot of the difference in dynamic that I can recall growing up. I don't necessarily know if there was like a sibling rivalry between us. We were just very aware that we were different.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because um, I tell mom and dad this all the time. I never felt envious or jealous of my siblings. Like that wouldn't be definitive at all of how we felt toward each other. We were always supportive of each other. We're always prideful of each other's accomplishments. Here I am, a straight D student, and my sister graduates with 2 degrees before I even finish my first degree, and she's younger than me. And never once throughout that era was I like, oh man, like I hate her, or I'm bitter towards this. I was always supportive of both of my siblings, and they me. I'll never forget the moment where my mom said, "We're frustrated. We're angry at you," which was normal, right? Because I was an underachiever. But she said, "We're not frustrated because your lack of intelligence." And she said this very phrase. She said, "You're not stupid. You're extremely intelligent, and your grades don't reflect that. That's why we're frustrated." And I'm glad that you mentioned that academics can be limiting, because that's kind of what I felt. Like I said, my head was in the clouds all the time, and as a kid it starts out like that, but when I grew up, that's when I'm like, okay, being me means bettering myself and making something of myself to prove to these people that love me so much that I'm not just a screw up. I can be just like my siblings, and I can take care of my family, but in my own way, in my own unique way that I found.
I have a thought, because James, you have kind of alluded to this a couple of times now in the conversation about once you finally kind of came around to it, did your self-discovery, you wanted to come back and prove to the family, prove to these people who love you that, you do value them and you have your value to the family. Julie, you've also mentioned this a couple times about when we've talked about how you perceive yourself. You've brought up your family a lot and how that's kind of affected how you perceive yourself, and ultimately kind of brought this sense of guilt, because you've used that word, this sense of guilt. And that's kind of a commonality that I've picked up on both of you. Can you speak to that a little bit and where you think that might stem from? Although you don't want to change your own value system, you still feel guilt from it. And that's something that I've picked up a lot in conversation.
Yeah, I think that's quite astute of you, although I'm not surprised given your introverted intuition. Okay, so what you're referring to is when I reflect back on myself and what I make of my character to be and the shortfalls that I believe I have. And what I said even in our last episode with MJ, as I read the description for my MBTI, well, in the description it said that they're extremely selfless and prioritize the needs of others before them. And I couldn't disagree more, because that was not me in our family. And oftentimes conflict would arise because of my relative selfishness and lack of thinking for others, and the actions that come as a result of that. Standing my ground but not doing it in a considerate way when I'm communicating is something that happened very often. And it came to a point where it's become my identity, where, yeah, I am a selfish person. I'm not proud of it at all, but I struggle to change it. And I'm not happy about that part of my character. I'm quite ashamed of it. But I would also know that it would kind of like pain my sister, even like listening right now, to think that that is how I feel about myself. So, in a big way, I'd say I've acknowledged it as part of me, and I keep it as a way of grounding myself to not be, way too confident and cocky about me perceiving myself to a certain standard. And so, I mean, I'm just going to end it there.
Yeah, I mean, I have thoughts on that. I still reject the notion of yourself thinking that you are a selfish person. I could go on a rant about that. But Sophia, what is your reaction to that? Because I know you mentioned earlier that you and Julie have had your fair share of fights. And now, as you've gone into adulthood, you've kind of come to this understanding of mutual respect for each other, although you're very rooted in your own value system and priorities. What was that dynamic like when you were kids, and how did you kind of come to this, to where you guys are now?
Yeah, so that's actually, it's a great question, and I was actually going to bring it up as well. But what I think what I've noticed from your and James's narrative is, it sounds like it was like the value of family was very much rooted and apparent in the household. I don't know, Julie, what you think, but for me, I didn't actually get that sense at home. So it wasn't that distinct, like school versus home for me. For me, I just can't recall any instances where it was like very family first or like family only. Um, for us, childhood, we were fine. Like, I don't know whether it was just me being oblivious, which very much is possible. But growing up, I kind of considered it to be a great relationship between me and Julie. Our quote unquote fights probably started when she hit puberty. And back then, I don't really know if it was because of family. I think the family kind of value topic probably got surfaced when we became adults, and when we were in, starting in university, maybe, or even later in university years. I think one of the key moments that I do remember, when I realized that there was a big difference in values was, for instance, like, oh, my sister, didn't visit my mom or my parents that often when, they didn't live that far. But she told me that she just drove like 4 hours to see a friend for a meal and then came back. Like, that scenario was shocking to me at that time, and I probably like fought with her about it afterwards. Or I don't know if we fought, but we definitely talked about it afterwards. And I think that was one of the earlier moments when I realized that there was a difference in values. And then from then onwards, I think we've had many fights and discussions about differences in value through many tears. But again, like, at this point, I think, and in the past, especially in the past couple of years, I have very much come to a point where I have fully internalized that Julie has separate values, and I can see when she puts in the effort for family, and I've just learned to appreciate those moments. And just what actually kind of upsets me, hearing that Julie like feels like a bad person or feels this immense guilt, is that if you're going to have these separate values, I want you to be, happy with yourself about it, Like, don't feel guilty for being you and for having those separate values. I think it's interesting, like, Julie and I just had this discussion, but she's someone who has to be told, like, A equals B, B equals C. Like, she has to be told A, B, C, D, but she will not know that A also means B, C, D. Like, she won't grasp, the multiple scenarios that this one teaching could be applied to. And I think that's the point. When I realized that a couple of years ago, that's when everything about Julie made sense for me. And I'm like, I just need to be patient. I need to tell her B equals C and
Yeah.
C equals D and A equals D. Like, I just need to, explain that through to her with many examples over time. But I cannot expect to tell her some A equals B 1 year, and then the next year her doing some action C. When she does action C, like, I would have to explain to her, okay, A also equals C.
Yeah, this reads with Julie. Yeah. I can see that. That's that's a pretty spot on depiction. And it's this constant reminder too of like,
Right.
no, Julie.
Exactly. So I think after I kind of came to that realization a couple years ago, I think my level of understanding just took it to a whole new level. And now it's more like, hey, it's just
Yeah.
Julie not understanding that A equals C. But it's not her trying to, like, it's not coming
Sure.
from a bad place at all. Like, she just completely does not understand that A
You know, like she's not trying to actively reject her
exactly,
family.
exactly. Like, they just people see to her currently
Right.
until she's told.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Sophia, I feel like you really accurately articulated my stream of consciousness of just because you have a different value system does not mean that you are wrong, and like you should own it. Like you didn't feel like there is a sense of guilt or shame because you feel like you are quote unquote different. And same goes for you, James. It's like that makes me a little bit sad that when you kind of came about that you had this urge to like prove yourself, because it's nobody ever questioned that you cared for a family. We just always knew that you took a different path. You were quote unquote like a late bloomer compared to
Yeah, I've heard that.
me and TJ, but that doesn't mean
Yeah,
that it was
yeah.
wrong.
Well, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, when mom would say, "Oh, you're extremely smart. You're the most intelligent one," I would be like, "Where?" Because I was like, I don't feel like the smartest one. I don't feel like the most talented one. But uh, time and time again, being told you're a late bloomer, you're a late bloomer. The more I began to accomplish, the more I began to believe it. Something that I've definitely come to terms with is not viewing that statement as of oh, you're a late bloomer as an unattainable thing, but eventually rising to meet that and saying, you know what, I am a late bloomer, and that's okay. But better than not blooming at all, right? And so, also regarding what Julie and Sophia shared, and for Julie, I want to ask you this because I noticed that you were getting a little hard on yourself. But I wanted to ask, from a place of encouragement, what do you think? Given all the things you just shared, what do you think the perception that your family has on you is? How do you think your family perceives you?
I think they think I'm wonderful.
That's the way I would have answered that as Julie is so different than the way Julie answered that.
Through
Interesting.
through an objective lens, not your
Through
own
an
subjective.
objective lens.
Yes.
I think what I mean to my family is like a source of energy. A lot of my personality comes through in like lightening up the mood or making it really fun. I'm trying to like gate myself from talking about the negatives that come after. My sister will know what I mean, but I think because I'm also the first child, and that I have, as a first child, had typical milestones that Asian parents would be quite happy with, and lived a traditionally decent timeline of achieving things, a source of pride. And I think that's it. It means a lot. It really does mean a lot. I don't mean to downplay it, but I think that is really the core of it all. And I would say that's not to say like I received so much love from my family, all of my 3 family members. I think I was the center of attention my whole life, also because I asked for it, and I got my full-on fill of it. I still do. So I'd say that me just kind of looking at myself and then reflecting on my negatives is where the whole family root comes from. But that's not to say that when I think about my family and how they think of me, I would say that that would be painted in a negative light.
Yeah, the oldest daughter trope in an Asian family is not, it's not an easy one. It's a lot to carry on your
Yeah,
shoulders.
it
So
it was fun though because I got all the attention.
we love that optimism.
Yeah, and conveniently enough, I delivered, but at the same time, even if I didn't, I think I'd be kind of brazen about it too, and still purport why I deserve all the attention. So either way, I think I would have gotten what I wanted as I grow up.
You know, this I guess brazen part of her personality has been prevalent throughout her whole childhood. So much so that I told her that she needed like 5 princes to maintain her upkeep. She had to marry 5 princes growing up.
One for each workday.
One for every business day.
All the water serving, food serving, like everything from A to Z. They need to serve her.
Oh my god. It was so funny to the point that I wrote it in my vows to my husband. Like, growing up, my sister told me that I need 5 princes, and then you're not it, but okay, you're good enough. Oh man, he does pretty good though, wouldn't you say, Sophia?
Oh yeah. Oh, I feel so bad for him. He's just one body.
Every day when my sister sees my husband on video call, he's like, "I'm so sorry." She's like, "Yeah," she's just like, "I'm so sorry." Oh man.
Sorry. But I also told him no returns.
But he has the capacity to handle all of that, right? To handle all of Julie. So of course he's
Exactly.
the one. He's her 24/7 prince.
He certainly has the patience of a prince. I will say
Yes.
that.
Oh, 100%.
That reaction.
That had a nerve in Sophia. It's like, boy, do you know?
Probably the number one quality you have to live with Julie. And I say that with much affection.
I hope I answered your question, James, and perhaps your concern as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, despite your guilt, I still think that what you explained is a valuable contribution to your family. So I don't want you to discount yourself, and feel. I mean, I'm also not gonna discount your feelings of guilt and shame because you're valid. You can feel those things, but well, the one thing I learned growing up is that even if you feel like your contribution is a little to your family, it's still a valuable contribution. You're still a part of this family, and you are one of the pillars. So don't be so hard on yourself.
I'm curious how that mindset plays for you today.
Well, growing up, I feel like my family was hard on me. And then growing up further, I feel like I was hard on myself. So then on this, I don't know what you want to call it, emotional pilgrimage, I would say, for lack of a better word, I would say that I came to a point in maturity where I started to be okay with myself. Your family is the one that you first come in contact with. They're your first social circle. They're your first teachers. They're your first heroes and idols. And so when the family growing up makes you kind of feel like you're less than, that you're not enough, it can be difficult. And so you carry that into the world. And so I carry that with me, and I think that's kind of where my people pleasing part of my MBTI came into play. And Alyssa mentioned before that I always had a huge social circle. I always committed to these plans. I always was going out with friends and doing this and that. But that kind of stemmed from my desire to be liked. And so if I felt like I wasn't completely liked by my family, I was like, okay, well, I'll find it elsewhere. I'll find it in this social circle and that social circle. And I experimented with certain clubs, and then I got really rooted into a church group that I was involved with for 7 or 8 years before I left. But I always just kind of was in this state of emotion where I was like, I just want to be liked. I just want to be accepted. And so after I reconciled that with my family, I reconciled that within myself. I was like, you know what? I'm all right. I'm doing okay. Whatever I have to contribute, the family will appreciate and love me no matter what. And so that's where it kind of came
Mhm.
full circle for me.
Oh, that's very interesting. You were able to connect what your perceived setbacks within the family dynamic to how that channeled out in your outer
Oh, I
world.
hungered for it.
Yeah, so I'm wondering now that you are coming to terms with it or even accepting your value and really doubling down on that, how does that affect your outer world today?
I love that you asked that because also earlier Alyssa had mentioned that my MBTI results had changed.
Wait,
You know,
sorry, please don't reveal it because I have a hypothesis.
yes, I will not. But when I was in the thick of this pilgrimage, I was trying to people please and make friends left and right. I would pay for things when I shouldn't have. I would give to charities when I had no money. I just wanted people to like me, and I got to a point where I was like, you know what? At the end of the day, my family's always going to be there. I'm going to go love on these other people that can hopefully reciprocate that love in some way. But at the end of the day, my family's going to be there. But then growing up further, fast forward to this point, I'm like, those people are outside of my circle now. At the end of the day, instead of my family will be there, I'll say at the end of the day, family's all I have. So that's where the paradigm shift is, where they are all you have at the end of the day. Take a pause on people pleasing outside of that circle. Take a pause on trying to make friends and take care of other people. So I hope that answered your question.
Wow. Yeah, and I actually saw, Sophia, you were nodding to it, and I don't think Sophia's reacted to James just yet, and I would just love to hear that dynamic. I'm sure a lot of it resonates with you. What were some of the reactions or thoughts you had?
No, I just thought he put it so well. Like, that is such a huge shift. And I think I've always been on that second half where family, I like, even when I was younger than now, like, I've known long term that family is all that I have. And I think in a way I'm almost too extreme on that because then I always, not always, but my social friend circle outside of family is very small. And I'm completely happy with that as an introvert, but I also don't put any effort into making new friendships per se because then in the back of my head I'm like, oh, they're just one chapter in my life, they'll pass by, which it'd be great to have friends long term, like till the end of time, right? But I guess because I'm in that mindset of it's probably family that's just going to be there at the end of the day. um, maybe I've gone too far in that end, but I am bringing myself back. I am making new friends. But I thought the way that James phrased it was really, really well done. And to be honest, like back when I didn't understand Julie, I did feel that the first half of what James said was more relevant to her, where I probably told her when, like, during one of our fights, like, you're taking family for granted. Like you're taking us for granted. Because you know that we're gonna be here no matter what, and so you're spending your energy out with your friends. And again, this was back before I fully understood where Julie was at, but the way that James just phrased it was like very, very well done, I thought.
Yeah, I think just again being able to understand both sides of the coin. So um, when Julie and James, when you guys have talked about your experiences, and the overarching feeling that I was getting was that living in this traditional value system to you guys can feel somewhat stifling and limited, and you couldn't find your sense of self within that value system, where it's, to me and Sophia, like that is like kind of our highest sense of honor to live in that system and to live by those values. And then vice versa, I think how we might have viewed James and Julie as younger kids is like that sense of self and putting your own values first could come off as very selfish. But for you guys, it's, if I cannot understand myself first, I cannot take care of the people around me. So it's valid on both sides of the coin. And I think being able to come to that understanding now as adults and coming together kind of as siblings is something that I think is really important. And I'm glad that we were all able to kind of
further
find that middle ground.
elaborate on what you've just summarized for us, Alyssa, and through the conversations that we're having, and James, thank you so much for describing that so clearly. I totally agree with Sophia that it also helped me figure out for myself. The way that I think is becoming clearer to me over the years is that I understand my family's, where my family comes from where they say what's important or what they want from me or what they want from each other or whatever that is. And I think I'm the type of person that needs many different types of to be told many types of perspectives by different people. And so I need to have my fill of it and my experiences through just people's actions as well and the relationships that I may make or break in order to find what's ultimately important to me. And the journey in doing that, even us having this podcast and asking people about their views and their values is a way for me to check for myself how much that aligns with me and reflect that people can think in so many different ways, and then come back to myself and think, oh, like I wonder how that lands, and I wonder how I feel about actioning some of that. And through that experience is where my values get more concrete. I can't say I'm at a point where, I mean, James, I know it took some time for you, where I feel like family's absolutely everything to me. And I genuinely still hope in, the way that I've also been raised, that I'll get there in a very genuine way myself, like to fully internalize that, because I also know through my data points in society that family is first for a lot of people, and there's a huge reason for that. And I feel immature in that sense where I haven't had that realization, but perhaps that's just not about maturity, and I understand that part as well in concept. But I wish to get there, actually.
Oh, sorry, Alyssa, go ahead. Oh no, just on that,
Go ahead, Sophia.
I don't know who I was talking to, but I was basically telling someone that I think Julie is someone who needs that external, anyone outside her family to kind of tell her that, family matters. Which, again, like, this is all with me understanding her now. And I think one of the shifting points between Julie and I in terms of level of understanding came from after she met her now husband. And a few years later and I remember Julie telling me like, oh, I'm starting to understand that, like, I see through him that he also values family. And now I'm starting to understand a little bit more that, maybe I should value family a little bit more. And so, like, those are all external, I guess what Julie said, data points. Like other people just need to kind of share their values and with her. Not that the family first is always the right one, but it is 100% like how I also see Julie kind of shifting her mindsets.
Yeah, you hit on 2 points that I was also going to make based off of what Julie said. Not that I'm surprised at this point. But one of the points is what you mentioned about having people outside of the family. And then Julie, you also mentioned collecting these data points for you to form kind of your opinion and your thoughts. Very true to your MBTI of needing to collect these external data points in order to form your opinion. So we're going to get into that. And then, Sophia, you just said it at the end, and I think you said it really well, is family first, family is everything, does not necessarily mean that it is the right thing. So Julie, when you mentioned like, hopefully I'll get to that point someday, I'm still working on it to get to that point where, like, if that's not innately in you, it's not a wrong or right. It is just, that's not your motivator. That's not your core. But it doesn't mean that you don't understand that family is important. It just means that it's not your motivator. It's not that, but that doesn't mean that it's your weakness. That's me trying to get it all out of my head before I lose it.
I get that. I understand what's happening. Well done.
Thank you. I feel like the conversation is starting to kind of naturally seep into our MBTIs. So I actually would love to have that be a part of our part 2. And yeah, I love all of the depth that we were able to get to for the first part of this conversation. So James, Sophia, again, thank you guys so much for sharing. Julie, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm good to close off on our part 1 and then continue on to part 2.
Sweet.
So with that, we should say our outro, and James and Sophia, you guys can join for the second one. I don't know, James, if you speak Korean, but Alyssa and I will go forward with it. 오늘도 수고했어.
오늘도 수고했어.
Oh, that was good.
Yeah, that was great.